It's 5 a.m. It is nearly impossible to complete a novel while working on a thesis or dissertation. Or at least that's what I thought. Before I looked at some examples of some amazing writers who do it all. R.F. Kuang, Holsinger, E. Lockhart. So that got me thinking, what would it take to complete a first draft of a 45 to 50 page long thesis and a zero draft of a novel before the end of the year? What would I have to do in a day to accomplish this huge goal? Good morning. It's currently 5 a.m. and I'm going to be trying a method that Catherine Lacey describes, where she wakes up at 5 a.m., writes until sunrise, and then actually goes back to bed and wakes up just a little bit later to give herself 2 starts to the morning. Today I have a lot of work to do for grad school. I don't have any classes I'm teaching or taking today, but still there's a lot I want to get done. But I've really been trying to prioritize my creative hobbies, like writing. It's gonna be interesting, and I'm excited to take you along all day as I try and balance these things. My instructional duties, my course preparation, and my personal writing. And specifically, today's going to be all about working on my 2 big writing projects, which are my zero draft of my novel and my thesis. I'll tell you more about it as the day goes on. I once heard the scholar Mark Edmondson say that in order to create good writing and get into a flow state, you either need to be over the wire or under the wire. Over the wire refers to these times when your adrenaline is high, maybe because of some exercise you completed right before, some nicotine, some coffee. And under the wire refers to that dreamlike state where your intuitions arise. Too much time to question the quality. Whenever I write early in the morning, it feels almost mystical. And this day was no different. I was jumping back into writing after a while away, and I was anxious the night before about whether I'd be able to pick up where I left off. However, in the haze of that 5 a.m. fugue state, I let the words have a life of their own. Now I'm going to take a little rest, and then I'm going to get back up again, like starting my day all over. 2 starts, 1 for the creative hobbies and 1 for the work day. And then after that, I'll have some breakfast and get into some work for my grad program. I'm not sure how I'm feeling about interrupting the momentum and indulging in a little bit more sleep, but I'm interested in trying this and seeing how it leaves me either refreshed or not refreshed, and whether it's able to channel my attention more effectively into my grad work, sort of close and contain this special space of my creative writing practice. So now I've got my coffee and my breakfast, and I'm really not sure about the whole going back to sleep thing yet. I think it will entirely depend on how productive my day turns out starting from here. Yes, I enjoyed setting boundaries around the writing practice. That seemed helpful, but also I woke back up feeling tired and unmotivated for the day. Going back to bed kind of seems like it might defeat the purpose of waking up at 5 a.m. But I want to hold out judgment. I'll have to wait and see how productive or unproductive it makes me the rest of the day. I'm just curious how this will play out and whether it will end up being successful or not. And this morning I got some of my writing done for the day, but I have a goal of getting at least 1 more page than I got, so I'll have to find some more time somewhere in my day to complete that extra creative writing. But now I'm gonna go get ready. Just a quick update. So now I've finished getting ready and I need to go find somewhere to read, to do a little grading, and to do some preparation for my classes because I do have an observation next week, and to start on my second big project, which is my thesis. And so I have some ideas about brainstorming and just getting those first words on the page that I'll show you guys as we go. But before I can even get into that work, I have to do the other things that I'm accountable for, including classes, the classes that I'm taking, and the students that I'm accountable for, the reason I get paid. So yes, I would love to get to my thesis, which is, what I need to graduate, but I do have other responsibilities and duties as a grad student. And of course, the whole day I'm going to be thinking about my creative writing project, but unfortunately, just have to get this other stuff done before I get to that again. Tune in to see if I am able to find time to get those last few pages in.
So I was reading a section from some Wise Ugly Feelings there, specifically a section that discusses the way different avant-garde writers in the mid-20th century invoked and transformed the idea of the sublime. So you might have encountered the word sublime from either the Romantics or from Immanuel Kant's philosophy or from discussions you've had about beauty. It's supposed to evoke the sense of your limitation that arises when met with great natural beauty of immeasurable or infinite scale. And in Kant's philosophy, it invokes a fearful sense of the limits of our perception that is soon superseded by a sense of rationality superiority. But Nye claims that different modernist writers like Gertrude Stein think about what would happen if a human encountered something totalizing but wasn't able to escape that uncomfortable or irritating or diminishing feeling of the limits of perception. Nye argues that the modernists encode this downward pull, this engagement with something so great and totalizing, but without the catharsis of sublime or the romantic sublime in their prose. So what does this look like? Nye analyzes a few passages where people in moments of great loss express themselves with circularity, with repetition, sentences that don't necessarily build but undo each other with tiny changes to syntax or word order or vocab. Nye argues that for other characters in these texts and for the readers, this prose which doubles back and undoes it and reworks itself without building, it has the ability to translate that feeling of whether it be loss or limitation or even confusing, surprising, but somehow still true closeness of boredom and astonishment.
So for lunch, I made a wrap with some roasted pumpkin, yogurt sauce, goat cheese, sriracha, baked tofu, a little balsamic, and some yummy peppers. Now I am so close to being able to work on my thesis project, but I just have to do one more task. I've done my course reading. Now I have to make sure I've graded some student papers and that I'm prepared for class next week when I'm going to be observed. So I'll show you some of that, and then hopefully I'll finally get into the thesis work.
I've heard a lot of grad students complaining about their teaching responsibilities, both online and in person, especially English grad students who have to teach entry-level composition classes. And more specifically, a lot of people seem to dislike grading, but grading is actually one of my favorite parts of teaching. So I wanted to give a few tips. One, make sure you set yourself up well. So whatever the case, rubrics, specifications grading, mandating revision, make sure that you give yourself the structure to succeed. I personally like to go for specifications grading because it allows me to focus on just helping my students get to the next level for themselves. Number two, reframe your perspective. If you change your mindset and let yourself think of grading as a chance to practice your skills at revision or developmental editing, it changes a lot. Think of this as a testing ground where you could perhaps collect a portfolio to send into editing jobs. Let it inspire you to be more rigorous in your own practice of reworking old essays. Number three, focus on structural pieces. Let yourself word your comments as questions. You might ask, what might change if XYZ? Did you consider this? How could you incorporate X element here? After grading, I finally got to do my first task of the day on my thesis. I haven't worked on it in a while, so I wanted to ground myself back in the project with a little mind mapping. And I've only ever really done mind mapping at a later stage once I have, a more complete draft and I'm working on the structural edits, but I wanted to see what would arise if I did it at my more preliminary stage. And I did indeed find it very productive. It kind of showed me that I'd done a bit more work than I thought I'd done. And by the way, just in case you've never seen Spiderweb Mind before, it is an organizational strategy. It's a tool that you can use in your analysis to connect seemingly disparate points or to encounter the whole of your project if you're looking at a larger scale and there's a lot of threads and you're not really sure how they weave together. And it's pretty easy to do. You start with the main ideas or the most general ideas, or you can even start with the ideas you think are furthest from each other and you branch out from there.
I've now managed to get a few pages of creative writing done, get through some of my course reading, grade some papers, do some mind mapping for my thesis, and collect some of the writing I've done already towards the total of 45 pages. I'm feeling pretty good, but I'd still really like to write some new sections of my thesis. Writing the sections of the bibliography was good, but it was mainly just synthesizing reading that I've been doing for the past few weeks. And what I'm really excited about is getting in the weeds of my close readings and compiling some of the quotes that I've been fixated on and seeing what arises when they're placed next to each other. But before I can get into that, or before I can even begin to think about getting the rest of my creative writing goal for the day done, I am actually going to go take a little break. I think balance is really important, and I'm going to go see Luca Guadagnino's new film, which is actually all about academia. And it'll be an interesting way to reflect on the collision of creative and scholarly endeavors. It did get the best review, so I'll have to keep you posted on whether I agree or disagree with the critical opinion. So yeah, I'm gonna go have some dinner and get ready for that. I'm back from the movie and, well, I kind of agree with the reviews. I just don't know if it was for me. I just, as a grad student, I kind of feel like how a tennis player would feel watching challengers.
I'm working on collecting the lines from Jim Barnaby's short fiction so that will help me think through the role of insects in modernist writing. And there were lots of interesting things. And I'll just give you a little taste of one of the questions that I raised for me. So there's this line where this sort of pathetic character says, I have crawled around the rim of the world like a fly. I know what I know. Men, he said ruminatively, were 40 feet tall. The screaming of those in death would sound like crickets chirping in the grass in the evening. And at first, this line just flagged my interest because of, the man's self-description as a fly, the description of others as crickets chirping. But when I read a little bit closer, I became more curious about who or what was being described as crickets. This man says, if men, presumably meaning humans, were taller, the screaming of those in death would sound like crickets. Well, who would sound like crickets? Who are those? If everyone was taller, everyone would be the same height. There wouldn't be any difference between this reality and that reality. You can't necessarily blame the transformation to crickets chirping on a variegational scale amongst humans. So is this man trying to dephenomenalize the present? Trying to draw attention to the way humans other and cast out? It's very curious. I'm nowhere near finding the answer, but it was so exciting to me that the lines that I had pulled out on the basis of small pieces, small words, small symbolisms, ended up containing even more questions. Close reading is always such a delight, and I'm so lucky to get to spend my time doing it.
Back, I was really exhausted, and I looked at the work I did on the earbibs and I just did not want to do anything else. But I pushed through and I managed to collect some of the quotes that I had annotated in my reading, and I was able to spend some time working on some preliminary close readings. So I'm really happy about that. And now, finally, I get to close the night with a special little treat, a little bit more time for my creative writing. So I'm really excited about that. Yay! Mission accomplished. Now I've wound down for the night. I've gotten through all my goals for my thesis, and I just have a few more pages to complete if I want to stay on track to finish my zero draft by the end of the year. And I'm really excited that I do have enough time and energy left over at the end of the day to get this done. I'll just work on this for a few more minutes, and then I'll head to bed in that dreamy, generative space of creative work. I'm super excited that I was able to balance these two really big things, my critical and my creative endeavors, and also that they were ultimately able to feed each other in productive ways. My creative endeavors gave me the confidence and focus to get through my critical work, and I think many of the things I read inspired me and added depth to my last few pages of writing. Thanks for following along for a really full and busy, but ultimately delightful and successful day.